Bill Condon, welcome to TCM.
Oh, it's so good to be here, Dave. I've been watching for years.
I know you have, and this is really fun for me because I should tell people I've known you since 1998 when your movie Gods and Monsters about the classic director James Whale came out, and you won an Oscar for it, no big deal. Your latest movie is Kiss of the Spider-Woman, a beautiful musical starring Diego Luna and Jennifer Lopez. It's on video on demand now. It'll be on Hulu January 26th. And you have selected 3 classic musicals that kind of were inspirations to you as you were directing Kiss of the Spider-Woman. So before we talk about these specific films, how would you say in general classic films were an inspiration to you for this particular movie, Kiss of the Spider-Woman?
You know, I think in so many ways design, but mostly it was the way that they shot the musical numbers that we really, really wanted to honor. It was the Fred Astaire idea that you watch people full figure, you know, and there are as few cuts as possible, and you really give the audience the sense that these dancers are doing it in real time. That's something that got lost, you know, in the sort of MTV generation and movies that have made since then. It was really fun to go back to that style.
I love that. The first movie that you've selected is CoverGirl from 1944, directed by Charles Vidor and starring Gene Kelly and Rita Hayworth. It's really a vehicle for Rita.
Yes.
And what I love about this is that Rita Hayworth, who dances gorgeously in this film, she, like Jennifer Lopez in your movie, plays 2 characters, right?
That's exactly right.
She's Rusty Parker, the nightclub dancer, but then she's also her own grandmother.
I know.
In the 19th century footage.
It's wild, you know, and that was an inspiration for that, playing different parts, you know. And also, there's another person, Eve Arden, in the movie. Right?
Always great.
Playing a fashion editor.
Yeah.
And that was an inspiration for Jennifer's character, too. So Jennifer's playing something between Rita Hayworth and Eve Arden.
And I love that you mentioned Eve Arden because it's not a huge role. She's kind of the assistant to the magazine magnate, if you will.
Yeah.
But I wanted a whole movie about her.
Absolutely, yes.
Now, Rita is not doing her singing. It's dubbed by Martha Mears. But I mentioned her dancing because she is a phenomenal dancer. And of course, she worked with Fred Astaire. I mean, this isn't a one-off, this musical performance by Rita Hayworth.
No, but I think she found her best partner in Gene Kelly. They're both at their height of their sexiness, you know, and they're both kind of exploding into Technicolor. And I think Gene he brought out a kind of sensuality in her, a comfort in her that I think was never really matched, you know, the openness, the innocence of it.
Yeah, and this comes at an interesting time for Gene Kelly, and maybe after the movie we'll really dig into this alter ego dance that he does.
Yes.
But people should look out for it. But it's a fascinating movie to watch because you're watching CoverGirl and you're thinking, when is Gene Kelly really going to start singing and dancing? Because it's such a vehicle for Rita that it's not until much later on in the movie that he really gets to show his stuff. Because this is early in his career.
Yeah, it's early, but it actually points to everything brilliant that he ever did. And we can talk about that later, but just if people watch it with one thing in mind, there's a great number called Make Way for Tomorrow. And it's Gene Kelly, Phil Silvers, Rita Hayworth dancing down this Brooklyn waterfront street. The mailbox becomes drums, everything's props and everything like that. There's a cop there. You realize how many times Gene Kelly then revisited that idea. Singing in the rain with the cop there. It's always fair weather. You know, he uses a garbage can to skate the street with, you know.
Yeah.
And it was all born here. So you see, it's just a testament to what an artist he is. He had obsessions and he kept coming back to them. And so many of them are introduced in this movie.
If there's a criticism for this movie, I've read that some people say the plot is very thin. Well, that's a fair criticism for lots of musicals, I would imagine. But in this one, Rita's a nightclub performer. She gets the chance to be on a magazine cover, and it raises her stardom level, and it's about whether her relationship with the nightclub owner, played by Gene Kelly, will last.
Yes.
But does that bother you, or is there enough going on that you don't mind?
You know, it's one of those things, you can't look for perfection in many of these movies. You just look for greatness. I think at a certain point, once you get to know a movie, I got to say, one of the things that was fun about Kiss of the Spider-Woman is that we only show 40 minutes of the movie, you know, and it's sort of the best bits. And sometimes I wish we could do that to a lot of movies from the period. Because, the plot, in a way, that's why I wanted to start with it, because I think you see the progression from this to something like Silk Stockings, then New York, New York. There's no clear dark side here, although Kelly is bringing it, you know?
Yeah. You talk about showing 40 minutes of the movie. You're talking about the kind of movie within the movie that your main character is describing to his prison cellmate in Kiss of the Spider-Woman.
Yeah.
I also just think it's fascinating, before we watch the movie, to remember that the director here, Charles Vidor, would work again with Rita Hayworth 2 years later on Gilda.
Her most iconic role. That's right.
And so
Yes.
obviously there was a great connection between the two of them.
Yes. And not a director who made many musicals, and I think he fought with Kelly a bit because he wanted to bring more darkness to it. And you can see that, there's this whole section, I don't want to give too much away, where she becomes an alcoholic,
Yeah.
And it's meant to be comic, but he kind of finds this other thing underneath it. There are all these little glimpses of dark in here.
Yeah, it's a great film. I'm glad we're going to kick off the night with it. So let's watch it and we'll talk more about it afterwards, okay?
Great.
All right, from 1944, directed by Charles Vidor, here are Rita Hayworth and Gene Kelly in CoverGirl. I'm back with Bill Condon to talk a little bit more about CoverGirl and how it relates to his new film, Kiss of the Spider-Woman. Let's delve into that great alter ego dance that Gene
right?
Kelly does, because the story goes that Charles Vidor, the director of the movie, really didn't direct that sequence. That was really staged and directed, if you will, by Gene Kelly with help from Stanley Donen.
That's right.
Does it feel like two different filmmakers to you, or does it feel like of a piece?
Not really, because, Gene Kelly and Stanley Donen worked on all of Gene Kelly's numbers, so it feels like the kind of companion piece to Make Way for Tomorrow. It's on the same set, but here it's the dark side, and he says, stop being such a hard-headed Irishman, and then later says,
you can't run away from yourself.
And that is almost the definition of what Gene Kelly worked out throughout his career. So that by the time you get to It's Always Fair Weather, it's right at the surface, his sense of self-loathing. And so to see that glimmer of it here, to have his conscience say one thing and then his more Irish, angry, jealous side say something else in song and dance, it's just a remarkable achievement,
I was really surprised to learn that apparently the whole movie had been shot, and then Harry Cohn, the studio boss from Columbia, said, you know what, Gene Kelly, I really want you to have a solo number. And that alter ego number was devised at the end of the production. What goes through your mind as a director to learn that they could be so nimble like that and just add a whole dance number at the end?
It is amazing, but they also had 2 weeks to figure it out. You know what I mean? That which there was this great luxury, and let's face it, they lived in a system with tremendous support. Less so at Columbia than at MGM, but they were making musicals there. But that, I think, was remarkable. It was rehearsed with Stanley Donen as his double. Stanley, I guess, couldn't keep up with Gene.
Who
and,
could?
Right, exactly. And shot once with Gene, and then the whole set was covered in black, and then shot again with Gene. And the fact that it merges so well is a miracle, right? Because it didn't have any of the tools that we would use now.
Yeah, but it is something that became a hallmark of Gene Kelly, these kind of moody, introspective dance numbers, if you will.
That's exactly right.
What else about Rita Hayworth interests you, especially in relation to Kiss of the Spider-Woman and Jennifer Lopez, for that matter?
Well, Manuel Puig, who wrote Kiss of the Spider-Woman, his first novel was called Betrayed by Rita Hayworth. He was particularly obsessed with her as a mid-century American film goddess, So Jennifer Lopez in Kiss of the Spider-Woman plays a goddess of that period. And there were many, many models. It was not only one, but Rita Hayworth was definitely a major, major influence. There's a scene where Jennifer lets loose on the dance floor, and that's what Rita would do in so many movies. And it was always kind of Latin infused. There's a line that Molina has that no matter how hard Hollywood tried to make her all American, she never stopped being Latin. And that was true of Rita Hayworth. Rita Hayworth, born Margarita Cancino, when she came to Hollywood, she had electrolysis to lift her hairline. Obviously, the red hair was invented by them. She'd come from this amazing family of dancers. In Spain, her grandfather, her uncle, and father danced with her professionally from a very early age. But she always had that Latin flair.
Yeah.
And that was a model for us.
Fascinating to think what her career would have been like had she been born 50 years later and maybe been more allowed to actually celebrate her own heritage.
I know, it's true. I will say, too, that Jennifer and I had lots of discussions about whether she should be a redhead or a blonde in the movie. And we looked at Lady from Shanghai, and that was the time that Rita became blonde, and it was so controversial. Changing the color of that hair was like incredibly upsetting for some people.
Yeah.
And also, did it fit her features? Did it fit her skin color? So we thought if she could do it, we could do it.
Well, Bill, that was a great film to start off the night with. Will you
Yeah.
stick around and we'll talk about some more?
Would love it.
Okay, great.
Good.
Stay with us because coming up next, we'll talk about a terrific musical from 1977, directed by Martin Scorsese and starring Robert De Niro and Liza Minnelli.
Next on TCM, New York, New York. Then silk stockings. And later, the pirate. The Buccaneer stops with TCM Tonight.